Surviving the Middle Ages just got a lot more intense. Going Medieval has finally reached version 1.0. And if you think you've already mastered building your settlement, you might want to rethink your strategies. You probably already understand the basics of farming or raising a simple wall, but today we're going to dive deep into the game. That's why I've put together 10 essential advanced tips that will save your colony from total collapse and take your gameplay to the next level. Pull up a chair by the hearth and let's begin. If you've made it this far, you already know that keeping food stocks cold in the summer is no easy feat in Going Medieval. The problem is that most people just dig a hole, throw the items inside, and hope for the best. But let me tell you something. There is a huge difference between a cellar made in a rush and one built with strategy. And that difference can be the line between feeding your entire colony or losing half your stock to rot. The first thing you need to understand is depth. Dig at least 3 levels below the surface. Why? Because the sun and summer heat penetrate the ground in layers, and each level you descend is one more barrier between the external heat and your supplies. You can reach actual temperatures of about 2 to 5 degrees Celsius this way, which is exactly what you need to seriously slow down rotting. Now comes the detail that makes all the difference and that many people ignore: the material of the walls and ceiling. In Going Medieval, compacted soil, dirt or soil, has the best natural thermal insulation in the game, reaching 0.95 insulation. This means that leaving the walls and ceiling as raw earth is, in most cases, superior to building with stone or brick. Yes, it might look ugly, but it works better. The last point is about diminishing returns, something the game doesn't explain to you directly. After 2 or 3 layers of soil covering your cellar, every extra layer you add will give you a minimal, almost imperceptible thermal return. So don't waste time and resources digging beyond that. Instead, combine your cellar with ice blocks inside the environment. They act as passive coolers and are the perfect complement to a well-insulated soil structure, keeping that temperature low for much longer. If you've ever gone through the frustration of building a perfect cellar only to see its temperature spike out of nowhere every time a villager enters with a full belly from the kitchen, you know exactly what I'm talking about. The temperature system in this game is surprisingly realistic, and ignoring the details can ruin months of stock planning. Today's tip is about heat flow control indoors, and it's simpler than it sounds. What you need to do is build an intermediate room between the kitchen and the cellar. Think of it as an airlock, like those double entrances at supermarkets that keep the air conditioning inside. This buffer room creates a physical barrier between the heat generated by the kitchen stoves and the cold you took so long to accumulate in the cellar. The secret lies in the spacing. Place 2 doors separated by at least 3 blocks from each other. This ensures that when a villager opens the first door to enter, the second one is already closed, holding the temperature. If the doors are too close, heat can still leak inside before the second door closes, and then you lose that thermal balance you worked so hard to achieve. This 3-block detail makes an absurd difference in practice. The temperature system in Going Medieval 1.0 is one of the most detailed I've ever seen in a colony builder. Clay walls, for example, have a thermal insulation of 0.9, the highest in the game. So combining this airlock with good walls around the cellar is the definitive setup for any serious colony. Once you set this up properly, you can say goodbye to spoiled food in the summer and focus on what really matters, letting your colony survive another season. Have you ever reached summer in Going Medieval and watched all that food you carefully stored start to rot because the cellar simply can't handle the heat? I've been through this more times than I'd like to admit, and that's when I discovered one of the most underrated mechanics in the game: ice blocks as an active temperature control tool, not just a winter decoration item. The trick is simple, but few people do it in a planned way. During the winter, even before the summer heat waves hit, you need to manufacture ice blocks and store a good amount of them inside your cellar, specifically on shelves or stockpiles configured with high priority. This ensures your settlers will always keep those blocks restocked in there, functioning as a natural and passive refrigeration system. What makes this tip even more powerful is that ice blocks continue to work even during the worst extreme heat waves the game throws at you. The cellar temperature drops consistently as long as there is ice present, and the larger the amount stored, the slower the melting process, which means you buy valuable time for your food. So if you want to keep that stock of meat, vegetables, and bread intact during the scorching summer without rushing for last-minute repairs, start stockpiling ice in the winter, as if your colony depends on it. Because honestly, it really does. Plan ahead, execute in advance, and summer will stop being a headache and become just another season you master. If there's one thing Going Medieval 1.0 does not forgive, it's underestimating an enemy attack with archers. I learned this the hard way, watching my settlers take arrow after arrow while trying to defend the walls from a completely exposed position. That's when I stopped everything, studied the construction mechanics more closely, and realized that verticality isn't just medieval aesthetics. It's a real tactical advantage in the game. The combination of archer towers with merlons, those classic battlements you see atop medieval fortresses, creates a defensive system that completely changes the combat dynamics. Merlons function as active cover for your settlers, drastically reducing the damage received from enemy archers while they continue to attack from above with freedom. In other words, you place your defenders in a position where they hit the enemy, but the enemy has a much harder time hitting back. And height matters more than it seems. The higher your archer tower, the greater the effective range of your settlers, and the less favorable the angle for enemy projectiles to reach them. This means that investing in taller towers with merlons on top isn't a waste of resources, it's multiplying the defensive value of every archer you put up there. One well-positioned archer is worth 3 on the front line. So next time you plan your fortress, don't just think about wide, thick walls, think about height and cover. Build your towers before the first major attack arrives, place the merlons without skimping, and you'll see your settlers surviving waves that previously seemed impossible to hold. Smart defense in Going Medieval isn't about the quantity of soldiers, it's about where and how you position them. When a large group appears through the forest and has multiple entry points available, your defenders scatter, traps are spread thin, and chaos takes over. The solution isn't to build more walls, it's to control where the enemy walks before they even arrive. This is where trenches come in as one of the most powerful tools in the game. Using the mining mechanic, you dig moats strategically around your base to eliminate alternative attack routes and funnel all invaders into a single entry corridor. A kill zone designed by you. This single path isn't a gift to the enemy, it's a giant trap disguised as an entrance. With invaders forced to pass through this corridor, you turn that space into a walking nightmare for them. Fill this path with spike traps, pressure traps, and any damage mechanism you've already unlocked. By the time enemies reach melee combat with your settlers, they are already weakened, slowed, and fewer in number than when they left the woods. The best part of this strategy is that it scales as your settlement grows. The more resources you have, the more elaborate your kill zone becomes, with more traps, longer corridors, and even archers positioned on the sides to take advantage of the channeled enemies. Planning the battlefield before the battle happens is what separates a colony that survives from one that merely reacts. And in Going Medieval 1.0, surviving with style is exactly what you want to show off. You know that settler you look at and they always have a frown, producing less than they should, and accumulating negative thoughts for no apparent reason? Before blaming the workload or lack of food, take a look at their room, because in Going Medieval 1.0, the environment where your villager sleeps says much more about their mood than anything else. I ignored this mechanic for a long time and paid the price, with entire colonies operating well below their potential. The peace and quiet mechanic is a positive mood modifier that is only activated when a villager has an individual bedroom, without sharing space with anyone. This means that collective bedrooms, no matter how well decorated they are, will never provide this specific bonus. It is much more worthwhile to build several smaller individual rooms than one large shared dormitory, because the mood gain compensates for every square meter invested. And when you combine the individual room with strategic decoration, rugs on the floor and tapestries on the walls, the mood modifier goes up even further, directly impacting the settler's level of optimism. More optimistic villagers work faster, get sick less often, and rarely have mental breakdowns during high-pressure situations like attacks or food shortages. Decoration isn't fluff in Going Medieval, it's an investment in productivity. So, the advice is to set up a comfort production line, build individual rooms as early as possible, prioritize rugs as soon as you unlock textile production, and add tapestries as resources come in. You'll notice the difference in the general mood of the colony long before you finish decorating all the rooms. A happy villager produces more, complains less, and when the next attack comes, they will defend your fortress with much more willpower than someone who barely slept right the night before. If you've ever watched one of your settlers simply stop in the middle of a field during summer, collapse from exhaustion, and leave a critical task half done, you know exactly how a heatwave can dismantle your entire colony's routine in a matter of hours. The game doesn't warn you with a pretty tutorial that the summer sun is a silent enemy, but it is, and ignoring it costs dearly in productivity and your villagers' health. The most elegant solution I've found to deal with this mechanic is to completely flip the work routine during periods of extreme heat. You go into each villager's schedule and adjust the shifts so they work during the night, when the temperature drops, and sleep or rest during the hottest hours of the day. It's a simple change to make, but very few players use it consistently because it requires you to think of colony management as something dynamic that changes with the seasons. The direct impact of this shift inversion is a significant reduction in cases of heat stroke and heat exhaustion. Two problems that, besides taking a villager out of circulation, can also generate negative mood modifiers that last for days in-game. With settlers operating in the cool of the night, they maintain their production pace without interruptions, and you avoid that frustrating sequence of seeing task after task abandoned halfway because someone passed out from the heat. It's worth remembering that this tip becomes even more powerful when combined with other temperature strategies like ice blocks in the cellar and building roofed spaces for outdoor work areas. Think of shift management as the human layer of the heat survival system. You protect your food with ice, protect your structures with shade, and protect your settlers simply by letting them sleep while the sun does its worst. One of the most rewarding mechanics in Going Medieval 1.0 is also one that goes most unnoticed during the early stages of the game, the specialized room system. You can build a blacksmith shop, fill it with equipment, and think everything is working fine, but if the game doesn't recognize that space as an official room, you're leaving valuable bonuses on the table without realizing it. I messed this up many times before understanding that building the equipment is only half the job. For the game to recognize an environment as a specialized room, you need to meet specific criteria for size, furniture, and equipment related to that function. A smithy needs to have the right items within a correctly defined space, just as a library needs enough bookshelves to reach the recognition threshold. When these criteria are met, the game activates the specialized room status, and the bonuses apply automatically, increasing the production speed of everyone working there. And the impact isn't just on production. Settlers working in specialized rooms receive positive mood modifiers for being in an environment suited to their function, which creates a virtuous cycle within the colony. A happy blacksmith in a game-recognized smithy produces equipment faster, with fewer breaks, and contributes to the general morale of the settlement in a way that a blacksmith working in a makeshift space never will. So, when building your workshops, don't just think about placing the workstation and calling it done. Plan the room size, add the complementary furniture, check if the game is recognizing the room through the interface, and only then consider that space finished. Every specialized room you activate is a silent efficiency multiplier that will show up in your colony's results in the medium and long term, especially as production demands increase with the settlement's growth. There's a classic trap I always fell into at some point. You look at a full food stock, see that hunting is going well, and decide to pause the hunters so they can do other tasks. It makes sense on the surface, but it's a strategic error you'll only notice when the next bandit attack arrives and your archers are shooting as if they've never held a bow in their lives. Hunting isn't just about food. It's a free and continuous training ground. The marksmanship skill in Going Medieval increases with use, and hunting is the most organic and consistent way to develop this skill without having to wait for an enemy attack. Every animal culled is a training repetition that will accumulate into skill levels that make a huge difference when your settlers need to hit targets that are shooting back. An archer with high marksmanship doesn't miss easy shots, reloads faster, and deals significantly more damage in actual combat. What makes this tip even more valuable is its zero cost. You don't need to build anything extra, you don't need to allocate resources, and you don't need to research any specific technology. You just need to keep the hunting order active and let your settlers do the work. The forest around your base is essentially a free archery academy that runs 24 hours a day, and ignoring this is wasting a progression system the game puts in your hands from the start. So even when the meat stock is overflowing, keep at least 1 or 2 hunters in the field permanently. Rotate villagers in this role if you need to distribute skill development among more settlers. When the next horde appears on the horizon and your archers start dropping enemies before they even get near the walls, you'll understand in practice why hunting should never be treated as an optional activity in Going Medieval 1.0. Digging deep is one of the most satisfying things you can do in the game. Creating that huge underground complex with storage rooms, cellars, and workshops carved into the rock like a secret fortress. But there is a specific moment where this satisfaction can turn into a disaster in a matter of seconds, and it happens when you excavate a room that is too large, without worrying about what is holding up the ceiling. The game has a real structural stability system, and it won't warn you twice before everything collapses. The rule of thumb you need to remember is simple. Place wooden beams every 3 blocks in any underground excavation. They function as load-bearing supports, distributing the weight of the structure above and keeping the ceiling where it belongs. Without this support, any room that exceeds the 7x7 block limit without a central support point is operating at constant risk of collapse, regardless of how long it stood before. And what makes this collapse especially cruel is the domino effect it causes. When an underground room collapses, the destruction doesn't stop there. Everything built above that area, walls, furniture, equipment, and any settler who was in the way, goes down with it. In a single moment of carelessness during planning, you can lose hours of construction and resources that took several seasons to accumulate, all because you skipped the beam stage thinking it wouldn't be necessary. So before expanding any underground excavation beyond the safe size, stop, count the blocks, and position the beams systematically. Treat structural support as a mandatory part of the project, not an optional detail you add later. In Going Medieval 1.0, underground physics is a system the game takes seriously, and players who learn to respect this mechanic early are exactly the ones who manage to build the most impressive fortresses without seeing weeks of work disappear in a single avoidable collapse.